So we need to first of all create a query that's going to select the specific data that we require from the database and display it to the user. So let's go ahead and say entries is equal to, and we use the same structure, we're using double quotation marks, we're going to put a query in here. This one's slightly different, we're now selecting from the database, so we say select, and we need to specify the fields that we want to select. And the fields that we want are timestamp, name, email and message, because these are all the ones we want to display. ID is just there for our own use, back-end use if you like, of having a unique number for each row. So we need to select timestamp, we want to put them in inverted commas if you like. So select timestamp, name, email and message from entries. So this query is now valid. What we've done is we've selected the timestamp, the name, the email address and the message from entries, and what this query is going to do is select everything. So regardless if we have one row as we have at the moment, 2 rows, 3 rows or 100 rows, it's going to select all that data. So we've selected each of these fields from entries, but now what we need to do is we need to put some kind of ordering in place, and we're going to order this by the time. So we say order by, and obviously you've already guessed we're going to order by timestamp, because the timestamp is a numerical representation of the amount of seconds from a specific date. I think it's 1990 at some point. So therefore the later values are going to have a higher amount. So we're going to order by timestamp descending. This means that the highest values are going to be at the top and the lowest values are going to be at the bottom. So this orders the data that's returned for us. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to check if there are any entries. So presuming that we have an entry, that's absolutely fine, but what if we don't have any entries? So what we need to do is we need to say if MySQL num rows of something is equal to 0, then we say, you know, there's no entries yet. But we need to run this query first. So instead of messing around, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to say MySQL query here. So we've created a query and we've executed the query on the same line, or run the query on the same line. Now what we need to say is we need to say if MySQL num rows entries, remember this value in here corresponds to the query that we've actually run. If you weren't to have that in there and you were to try and do that, it wouldn't work. So we need to run the query here and wrap that in brackets before we do anything else. So if MySQL num rows of entries, this is going to produce an integer value. At the moment it's equal to 1 because we have one row in our table. But if it does equal to 0, we're going to say something like echo no entries yet. Okay, and then otherwise we're going to display everything. So simple as that. Let's just go ahead and echo entries found. Okay, so let's go ahead and delete this. In fact, let's refresh this first. You can see that we've got entries found because we have more than 0 in the database. We don't have a minus amount. Obviously we don't have an amount, we have an amount greater to 0, but it doesn't equal 0. If we were to delete this, we have an empty result set, i.e. 0 rows. Therefore this if statement here is going to equal true. So MySQL num rows entries is going to equal to 0, therefore we're going to display this value here. Let's go ahead and refresh and see what happens. No entries yet. So now we're at the point where no entries have been made. When we do make an entry, Alex at phpacademy.org, and love what you've done with the site, click post, entries found, but we haven't displayed them yet. So now that we know that we have entries in our database, we're going to go ahead and actually display them. To do this, we need to create a loop, and I'm going to be using a while loop, and inside of our while loop condition we're going to be creating an associative array from the values in our database. Now obviously I know it sounds scary, but what we're actually doing is we're just creating an array, as we've already done up here with our errors, so you know what an array is. But the array is going to be an associative array. So the value or the key of our associative array is going to correspond to the field name. So what we can actually then do is pick out, we want to display the timestamp, the name, the email, and the message just by the field names. So follow along if you don't understand what I'm talking about, and hopefully you'll get the idea of this. So we create our while loop here with our block there. Inside here is a condition, and this condition is going to be while entries row is equal to MySQL fetch associative, and that's abbreviated to ASOC, and then entries. So remember, this is the query that we've already run. This function takes our query that we've run and creates a associative array, and this entries row is now our associative array. So inside here we can start referencing values from our associative array, and this is going to loop. This loop is going to loop for every record in the database. So for every record in the database we're taking values from this query. Hopefully that makes sense. It just means that if we have 0, this will never loop. If we have 1, this will loop once. If we have 2 rows, this will loop twice, etc, etc, etc. That's why we're not using a do while loop, because we need to check the condition before we go into the block of the loop. So now what we can do is we can say guestbook, or we could say entries timestamp equals, entries row timestamp.